Good afternoon. Welcome to Fighting for a Climate Future in New Jersey. This is our third webinar in our summer series, and I'm your host, Tamara Tripp, Regional Director of Development of Food and Water Watch and Food and Water Action. For everyone who has joined us live, thank you. If you are watching us as a recording, we missed you today, but we are grateful that you're joining us now. And thank you so very much for being part of today's conversation. Thank you so very much for your generous support of Food and Water Watch. We truly, truly can't do any of this work without you. So last week, we had a big win for clean energy in New Jersey in our Community Choice Aggregation campaign. After nearly 2,000 residents signed petitions demanding a vote on clean energy, Edison's Township Council responded by adopting our Community Choice Aggregation Ordinance. This will put the 5th largest township in the state on the path to 100% clean energy by 2030. And Edison is not the only town in New Jersey to do this, but so far they are the largest. And we are proud to say that we've passed similar programs in New Brunswick and Piscataway. This is an expansive program campaign that our team in Food and Water Watch New Jersey is leading across the state. We will talk more about this today. But before we start, I wanted to mention that you can use the Q&A function or the chat to add any questions you have for now or for later in the program for any of our guests. We are starting our conversation today with our New Jersey director, Matt Smith. Matt has been with Food and Water Watch for 8 years, and many of you, I'm sure, know Matt either from working with him directly with him at rallies, lobby days, or attending local education or council meetings. Hey, Matt. Matt is a lifelong New Jersey resident. He's a fierce, fierce advocate and fighter for a better, healthier New Jersey. So we're very excited to talk with Matt. Also joining us today is Charlie Nunzio. And Charlie, we're having a little computer issues, so hopefully we're working out, but yay, there's Charlie. Charlie is one of our close friends. He's a supporter of Food and Water Watch, and Charlie has just been such an incredible advocate with us, and we're delighted to have Charlie to share his story. So thank you, Charlie, for being here. Matt, before we get into the topic at hand, I wanted to just warm us up today. And I've always heard that you have quite a story to tell about your time interviewing with Food and Water Watch. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Tamara, and hi, everyone. It's good to be with you all today. I had a fairly, I think, unique story in coming aboard with Food and Water Watch. I had actually been a volunteer with the organization for a couple years through a local pipeline fight, the Tennessee gas pipeline fight through northern New Jersey back in 2011. And so I developed relationships with some of the staff at the time, Jim Walsh and Karina Wilkinson. And, I thought that first interview went pretty well. So when my second interview was scheduled for 2 weeks out, I thought, before I maybe have to settle down with this new job, I might as well go do something a little adventurous. So I went and participated in a week of actions against fossil fuel extraction. There were actions happening in West Virginia against mountaintop removal mining, in Texas against the Keystone XL southern leg of the pipeline. And similar actions throughout the country. When I went to West Virginia, it was incredibly powerful. We nonviolently occupied the largest mountaintop removal coal mine site in the state and shut down operations for a full day. Little did I know that I would subsequently be put in jail, and that the magistrate, the equivalent of a judge up here, would leave town for 2 weeks and set bail, as the only way to pay bail was on a lien against a West Virginia property, meaning all of us from out of state were out of luck. So there I was, stuck in jail. I'll never forget my first phone call after 3 days of no contact with the outside world. It was my mom. And
your poor mom.
She of course wanted to know how I was doing. I told her I was doing well. But I said, you know what, Mom, I think I blew my chances with Food and Water Watch. She told me, no, Matt, they're actually fundraising for you and your friends. They've started a social media campaign to get you out. And I was like, wow, that's really exciting. Maybe I didn't blow the job with Food and Water Watch after all. So, that story for me kind of came full circle last year, because the one good book I had access to in my 2 weeks in complimentary stay by the state of West Virginia was a book by Naomi Klein, Shock Doctrine. And it really allowed me to sort of like take my mind off the situation and really learn some interesting things. And so, fast forward to last summer, and we were embroiled in a fight against the Meadowlands power plant. We organized a major student-led March for Our Lungs. I'm sure many of you were part of that. And so I wrote a personal email inviting Naomi to speak at the event. And so when she accepted the invitation and delivered a really powerful speech at the march along with her son, it was just a dream come true for me personally, and what felt like a really powerful moment for our local movement here in New Jersey.
That's great, Matt. I love that story. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. So Matt, let's get into what we're talking about today, which is one of our solutions for a renewable energy future. So can you tell us what community choice aggregation is?
Yeah, community choice aggregation is actually quite simple. It allows residents in a community to collectively purchase electricity and choose the source of that electricity. Oftentimes, historically, it's been used to save money on people's energy bills. You have increased purchasing power when you buy collectively with thousands of your neighbors. And so Food and Water Watch is actually using community choice aggregation, not just to save people money, but also to facilitate a rapid transition off of dirty sources of energy and onto 100% clean, renewable energy.
That's great, Matt. So can you, I think too that we have a few things we're going to add to the chat. We actually have a specific campaign website for this. And then we also have a fact sheet. So we're going to add some things in the chat throughout the discussion today. So, Matt, tell us just a bit more about what our campaign looks like now, and also, give us a sense of how we got started and what successes we've had so far.
Yeah, so really the key for us for this campaign, which started in 2018, was us combining two laws that exist here in New Jersey, both the New Jersey Energy Aggregation Act, which allows municipal governments to start these renewable energy aggregation programs for the residents. And the second is the Faulkner Act and Walsh Act, which allow about 2/3 of all towns and cities in New Jersey. It gives their residents the power to do petition, initiative, and referendum. So we sort of combine those two into a really proprietary ordinance and petition initiative that we first launched in New Brunswick, New Jersey in 2018. After gathering signatures from 10% of the voters there, we triggered a mandatory council vote on our 100% renewable community energy aggregation ordinance that, before we triggered that vote, the council was ignoring us. We went to several council meetings, had dozens of people write and call their members, and were largely being ignored. So it was really in that moment when we forced a vote, and the New Brunswick City Council actually approved our ordinance by council vote, that we really saw just what kind of power we had with this program. So, we've been sort of moving forward since then, and, really what, I'm just excited to talk about sort of like where the campaign has gone next.
Great. So yeah, let's get into it. So tell us a little bit more about the campaign. What are our search strategies? What are our tactics? And what are we using to replicate what we've done in Piscataway and New Brunswick?
Yeah, so really big picture, we recognize that with, Trump in the White House, and with, a Congress that has long failed to take up the kind of bold climate policy that we need, community choice aggregation allows us to work at the local level to actually facilitate this transition off of fossil fuels, which is so critical. The other thing it allows us to do is it allows us to engage everyday people in the democratic process around this question of how quickly we need to get off fossil fuels and onto clean energy sources. The second campaign that we organized was in neighboring Piscataway, New Jersey. And in Piscataway, it went a little differently. We collected over 1,100 signatures from residents, primarily through door-to-door canvassing. This is actually a photo of some of our canvas team. And after talking with over 1,000 residents, it was very clear that the overwhelming majority of them supported, action from their local government on clean energy. So when the town council actually voted down our ordinance, what that meant was that it was placed on the ballot, the November 2019 general election ballot. So we ran an aggressive get out the vote campaign, talked to over 4,000 voters between September and the November 4th election day. And all of that work led to an incredible result. We won commandingly with the 2/3 majority voting yes to our 100% renewable energy ordinance, which means that now not only all households in New Brunswick, but all households in Piscataway are on a path to get all of their power from 100% clean renewable sources by the year 2035.
That's great, Matt. So, what are some of our other priority communities? And I know we're very excited about the win last week in Edison. But yeah, so what are some of our other communities that we're working in this year, and what is happening?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Edison, we had a big win last week. It was our third successful community choice aggregation campaign. Edison's actually the 5th largest municipality in the state, and so we had to collect and submit over 2,000 petition signatures from registered voters. We did the bulk of that through door-to-door canvassing, largely in the winter. So our canvass team showed incredible resilience to knock on doors in the cold, to talk to the public and get support for the program. Once we qualified our ordinance for a mandatory council vote, we led an aggressive advocacy campaign that saw dozens of people speak out at council meetings, speak out at the council hearing. And our Central Jersey organizer, Charlie Cradaville, did amazing work to secure the yes votes that we needed to win without having to go to the ballot. So last week, Edison voted unanimously to enact our ordinance. Similarly, this year, we have collected enough signatures to go to the ballot in East Brunswick. And we just submitted signatures last week in Collingswood, New Jersey, which is a town in South Jersey in Camden County. So that would be our 4th and 5th campaigns so far. And, we have ambitious plans to really expand and grow this across the state in the weeks and months ahead.
That's great. I think we have some other things that we're going to add to the chat, some more resources on how to specifically get involved. So we're going to add those to the chat, and certainly we'll also send all these things from the chat as a follow-up, just so everybody knows. So Matt, thank you so much for telling us a bit more about the community choice aggregation campaign. So can you just tell us, why is this so important for New Jersey specifically to facilitate this rapid transition off of fossil fuels? And can you tell us what else is happening in New Jersey this year?
Yeah, so those of us who live in New Jersey, we are well accustomed or familiar with the rap that, it's the dirty Jersey state. We do suffer from some of the worst air pollution and air quality in the country, particularly in low-income communities of color like Newark and Camden, who lead the country in asthma rates and other lung disease. So getting off fossil fuels it's about fighting the climate crisis. New Jersey is a coastal state. We're particularly vulnerable to rising sea levels and increasing floods, but it's also about public health. And particularly in an unprecedented pandemic, it's never been more important to get off of fossil fuels. And by transitioning our towns and cities onto clean energy, we're actually undercutting the demand, not just for new fossil fuel projects, but for existing ones. And the new projects are critical because New Jersey, even though we're not an extraction state, we do sit between the Marcellus Shale, which is the largest fracking play in the country, in North America rather, and markets that the fossil fuel industry wants to get their dirty fuel to in New York City, New England, and even export overseas, which they predict half of the gas is actually for. So, over the years, we've seen New Jersey's been overwhelmed with, new pipelines, new polluting compressor stations, new power plants, and currently now even a liquefied natural gas export terminal on the Delaware River. So we've been fighting these projects really since I started. That's one of the big reasons I came to Food and Water Watch, is our commitment to fight these projects at the source. And we've had some great successes along the way. We've stopped the Pilgrim pipeline, which would have brought fracked Bakken crude oil down through New York into North Jersey and the Bayway refinery. Last summer, we stopped the proposed Meadowlands power plant, which would have been one of the largest climate polluter in the state. Also last summer in June, we made history when we got Governor Murphy and Governor Cuomo, our team in New York, partnered for this win to reject the Nessie pipeline. It was the first time New Jersey, a standing governor in Jersey, used their authority under the Clean Water Act to reject a federally approved fossil fuel project. So we recognize that these fights are ongoing. We know that we're in a critical moment with the economics of the fossil fuel industry quickly eroding. And so right now is the time to not just fight every pipeline tooth and nail, but also get at the source, get at the demand side, and increase the demand for renewables and therefore decrease the demand for these dirty fossil fuels.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we had a conversation with our Pennsylvania team a few weeks ago to kind of talk a little bit more about what's happening there. And as Matt said, that is, really the source. So if you missed it and you're interested, definitely let us know and we'll send you that conversation. So, so Matt, thank you so much. I want to also now welcome Charlie Nunzio to join us. But Matt, you've worked so closely with Charlie over the years. So I was hoping that you could introduce Charlie for us.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I first met Charlie in 2011 when we were fighting fracking and fracking waste. There was a proposal to open up the Delaware River to over 20,000 fracking wells. And, it was a major fight that we won. And, I encountered Charlie through that effort and his, many of his friends and partners at Franciscan Response to Fossil Fuels. And, since that time, Charlie's been with us every step of the way. He's someone that always or never hesitates to use his voice to speak truth to power, whether that's coming to public hearings or rallies, or by publishing really punchy and humorous letters to the editor. So really excited to have Charlie here with us today.
Yay, thank you so much, Matt. We'll see you in a few minutes. Charlie, welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
Yay.
Yeah, it was, I think I first remember Matt when our social justice ministry at our Franciscan parish, in 2011, we showed the film Gasoline, and we even had Josh Fox kind of speak afterwards. He brought his banjo and played a tune. But the film was an eye-opener for our group on the destruction caused by fracking. And it sparked us to get involved and try to, in the efforts to ban it. So we found an ally in Food and Water Watch.
That's great, Charlie. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about, how else you learned about us.
Our leader, Jackie Schramm at the time, invited Jim Walsh from Food and Water Watch. He was on the East Coast then, and he spoke to our group about policy issues. We formed the group Franciscan Response to Fossil Fuels and worked with Matt on many campaigns. So some of the campaigns, some of the things we did, and I'm probably forgetting half of them, I went with Jim Walsh and other activists to meet in Senator Booker's office in Newark with his chief of staff in 2015. And that was about GMOs, food labeling. And again, we met with another group with the chief of staff on climate issues. When our church held an environmental fair with exhibits on things like solar power, composting, fair trade items, Matt helped us out with the Food and Water Watch stainless water bottle. And the campaign at the time was take back the tap.
I love that you brought props, Charlie. That's great.
Yes, I have props, and I still use it. So the thing is, we had a pitch the plastic game at the fair, where if the contestant pitched 2 out of 3 plastic water bottles into a bucket, they'd win the steel bottle. And while they played the game, we reminded them of the ecological downside of 50 billion plastic bottles a year being produced. So Food and Water Watch and my Franciscan group got me spurred to do things like marches for climate in New York City, Albany, Washington, D.C., that was a hot day, and many demonstrations in New Jersey. And we can note that New Jersey just had the hottest July on record this past July. But I joined Matt with and an intrepid band of activists to protest that Tennessee gas pipeline in West Milford. And later the Pilgrim Pipeline and oil trains, and that's still ongoing. We joined in actions against the Meadowlands Power Plant, and currently our Franciscan response to fossil fuels is fighting proposals for the New Jersey Transit Power Plant and the West Milford natural gas compressor station upgrade. Recently, I called into the New Jersey Transit Board public hearing on the proposed gas power generator in Kearney. The essence of my remarks, and I'm sorry it wasn't held in person so I could see the looks on their faces, but I said, New Jersey needs this gas power plant in Kearney like we need a third nostril. Speaking of breathing, the plant would add air pollution to communities that already suffer environmental insults, and of course, contributes to our carbon footprint. I just want to acknowledge our core members of our group, our Franciscan group, who inspire me by their tireless efforts. They do more than I do. I'll just give their first names: Barbara, Renee, Paul, Ken, Jeff, Camille, Norbert, Carol, and Ruth. And there's more, but that's all I can remember at the time. So I'm inspired by them and by Food and Water Watch.
That's great. I actually think several of them are on today's call. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And Charlie, can you just, tell everyone here, just what inspires you to not only work with us, work with our team in New Jersey, but, also donate and support Food and Water Watch? What inspires you?
Well, I've seen what Food and Water Watch has done and is doing for the planet, our common home. For example, this resolution that was just recently passed to put green energy on the ballot for community choice aggregation. We need Food and Water Watch's actions based on science and scholarship to counter the power of lobbies that steal our representation in Congress. And I'll just add a little spiritual note here. We've treated the earth as a commodity that belongs to us when it's really a community to which we belong. And so when we know better, we'll do better. We're in kinship with creation, a kinship in which all things are connected. Thank you very much.
Oh, Charlie, thank you. And we couldn't agree any, we agree with you. So thank you so very much. We're so grateful. So we are gonna ask some questions now, and you can ask questions of Matt, you can ask questions of Charlie, you can ask questions of me. So I know we have a few questions that were sent in advance and that were added. So let's get started. So thanks for coming back, Matt. So Barbara is on with us today, and she asked a question. She asked, is the Meadowlands Commission actively involved in fighting the New Jersey Transit Power Plant? As a protector of the Meadowlands, I would think that they would be leading the charge. So Matt, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so the Meadowlands Commission sort of renamed themselves the New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority. And, you know, like most appointed agencies in New Jersey that control money and resources, it's very political. So that's one of the things we're always navigating is, you know, despite a stated mission of a body or organization, there's always politics driving this. And in this case, you know, it's really about, you know, Governor Murphy failing to demonstrate the political courage because, you know, Governor Murphy appoints the board members of the Meadowlands Commission, and he appointed the current chair, former Assembly Speaker Vincent Prieto. And so we really need, and that's why it's so critical that we have, you know, such strong partnership and participation from so many of you on the call and grassroots groups and organizations across the state who are coming together to call on Murphy to demonstrate that political courage and say no to fossil fuels definitively, because Murphy is really the elected official in New Jersey who has the authority to stop these projects like the New Jersey Transit frac gas power plant.
That's great. So Matt, another question that was put in by John is, have you done any of the community choice of those ordinances in South Jersey? So maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, so just last week, we submitted enough petitions, 10% of the registered voters in Collingswood, New Jersey, which is in Camden County, to qualify our ordinance for a mandatory council vote. And then if the council fails to pass it, then it'll go on the ballot in November. And we have plans in 2021 to expand to over a dozen towns and cities across the state, including many in South Jersey, like Cherry Hill, Mount Laurel, and others. And we also want to work with more local residents who can take it to their towns and city councils. So I think, you know, we'll put in the chat a link for anyone that wants to sign up to help bring community choice aggregation to their community.
That's great. So Matt, we also have some folks who are joining us from outside of New Jersey. So could you just talk to whether or not this is even possible outside of New Jersey, in other states possibly?
Yeah, I think there's at least 8 states who have laws on the books that allow for community choice aggregation. States that I know of that allow this are Massachusetts, New York, California, and even Florida. So, you know, I can also put my email address in the chat. So if anyone had a question about a state that I didn't mention, I can get that answer for you. But yeah, we're seeing our organizing teams in other parts of the country who are also pursuing community energy aggregation. And the one other thing I failed to mention that I think is so critically important, we're not just doing this to get towns and cities off fossil fuels. We're doing this in key congressional districts to build political power by mobilizing with thousands of people to get them engaged in these issues. We can actually take on the bigger fights of winning the state and federal policies that we need to transition our entire country off fossil fuels.
That's great. That's great. So one of my goals for these webinars was to keep them short, but I wanted to ask if Charlie or Matt had any kind of like parting words for us. And hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot. But yeah, let us know if there's anything else you want our folks to know here.
Well, you could look at Mars, which has an average temperature of about 864 degrees Fahrenheit, and but it's a dry heat, so it only feels like 600. But it has 97% atmosphere of carbon dioxide, and it's about 90 to 100 times denser than our atmosphere. So I mean, that's proof right there that climate change is happening here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Charlie. And yeah, I don't know, Matt, if you have any kind of parting words for us.
I mean, I think one of the lessons I've been fortunate enough to learn during my 8 years at Food and Water Watch and working with so many of you on these campaigns is that, that old adage about it always looks darkest right before the dawn is really so true. When we set out to stop the Meadowlands power plant, we had no idea that we could win. Governor Murphy was clearly, supportive of the project, or at least clearly committed to remaining silent. And it was really our ability to take that leap of faith and know that, regardless of the outcome, that it was being in that movement together and fighting for what we knew was right was always enough. And when we led with that kind of, courage and faith, we actually ended up building the political power along the way that we needed to win. So I really think that's so critical, especially in these challenging times, that we have that we embody that faith and that courage that we need.
Absolutely. Thank you both, Matt and Charlie, for joining us today. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I also want to thank you all for your generosity to Food and Water Watch. You are truly the heart of our work. You are our climate champions, and you are our heroes. All of you are generous supporters already, so thank you. If you are able or would like to make another gift today, please do so. We'll include a link in the chat. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, I encourage you to join our last webinar in this series, which is September 10th. It's featuring our work in Massachusetts, where we're going to talk with our lead attorney on how we're fighting the fossil fuel industry through legal action. So we'll share information in the chat about that. And lastly, and you may have seen this on the slide in the very beginning, but I want to encourage you to attend our 15th anniversary virtual benefit. It's on September 29th. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're actually going to be joined by Jane Fonda, Bill Moyers, comedian Sarah Cooper, and a number of other really special guests.
Ooh.
So there's a lot of fun in store.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So definitely sign up, join us. And thank you all so very much. Have a great, great evening, and thank you.